Okay, good morning, everyone. We'll let people trickle in as they come in. So, welcome to December's Open Research Office session. This is our last one for the year. And today's speaker is Austin Glick. He is a clinical data manager. And Austin, whenever you're ready, you can get started.
Perfect. Thank you, Michelle. Hello, everybody. As I was introduced as, my name is Austin Glick. I am a clinical data manager in the Office of Clinical Trial Development and Implementation. And today I'm going to be talking about the new EDC that we have to offer, Advarra eSource plus EDC. So first, I'll give a little bit of background on myself, why I can give this presentation. I worked as a data manager my entire career. I've worked in multiple different settings and have had the opportunity to work on a ton of different EDC platforms over the course of my career. So I've seen a lot of the different things and what they have to offer, and this is a great one that we now have to offer to the university. So first, we'll go over kind of the purpose and what we'll cover in the presentation. So we're going to explore Advarra eSource plus EDC, a platform for capturing and managing clinical research data, which streamlines workflows, improves data accuracy, and reduces manual effort. And what we're going to cover is a data management overview to start, what is an EDC, some little brief topic on regulatory compliance, what is the Advarra eSource plus EDC platform that we're offering, some benefits for academic research, a little bit of system architecture and workflow, how it integrates with some of our existing systems here at UB, and then some future features. So first, we'll start with kind of a brief data management overview to see what the justification is for this system. So this is a data management workflow. It is not everything that a data manager does on a daily basis. It's kind of a brief workflow with all of the general things that we do and the general steps that we do. But for today's presentation, we're going to specifically be focusing on these 4 items. So when we get a protocol or we get a new study that I'm pulled into as a data manager, we help with the protocol review and development. And then the first big item that we work on is identifying data collection needs and specifically identifying the electronic data capture or EDC system that we want to use for that study. And then we build case report forms, which are called CRFs. And we set up other additional utilities like randomization, electronic patient reported outcomes, reports, and things like that. And so it's really important that we have an electronic data capture system that does everything that we want and gives us easy workflows for setting all of this up. So why is efficient data capture important? It ensures high quality and accurate for clinical research. It minimizes transcription errors and manual data entry. It improves our compliance with research protocol and regulatory standards. I'll touch on these a little bit more in the future slides, but the system's really good for regulatory standards. It saves time and reduces costs for our research site staff, as well as for data managers and PIs. Facilitates timely decision-making and reporting, and it enhances data security and patient confidentiality. So efficient data capture is really important when we're working on a study. There's a lot of things that are improved from efficient data capture, and it really helps time saving and make sure that we're meeting everything and we're meeting the timelines that we want. So then we kind of jump into what is an electronic data capture system or an EDC. So an electronic data capture system is a software that stores patient data collected in clinical research. Data is typically first recorded on paper and is then transcribed into the system and saved in an electronic case report form or ECRF. That has been changing slightly. Some EDCs are moving to eSource, which I'll talk about regarding Advarra in the future, but typically data is stored on paper first and then transcribed into the system. Sponsors, contract research organizations, also known as CROs, and sites have adopted EDC systems to carry out both simple and complex trials in all phases of research. And most EDC systems offer slightly different features, but in general, EDC software is designed to streamline data collection. So as I mentioned in the beginning, with my background, I've worked in a lot of EDCs over the course of my career. They all differ, they all do the same thing, but they have a lot of different features, a lot of different user interfaces, some different workflows associated with them. So the EDC that you're using is important. And most people do have experience with EDC because one that I'll bring up pretty frequently during this presentation is REDCap. That is an EDC system that is available at UB. Everybody really uses it, so it's something that I'll be comparing and contrasting against throughout this presentation. So how does an EDC work? Starts with data entry. Data is collected during a clinical trial visit, and then it's entered into the EDC either directly or it's transcribed over from paper forms or the electronic medical record, the EMR. This includes information like lab results, vital signs, patient-reported symptoms, adverse events, anything like that, medical history. Anything that needs to be collected for the study is going to be reported in the EDC. Then data is validated. So as the data is entered, the system runs checks to ensure it falls within acceptable ranges and formats. If an error is detected, the system can then alert the user and prevent the submission of incorrect data. This is really important. Data validation has come a really long way in the past 10 years within EDC systems. Now in modern EDCs like Advarra's EDC that I'll be talking about, there's a lot more validation tools that we can use so that things can be more automated. A data manager like myself has to do a lot of data review, and there's a lot of data that we have to review, and we are humans at the end of the day, so we can make a lot of mistakes. So these data validation tools allow us to set the system up in the beginning before the study starts to run these automated checks and make sure that we catch things before it even needs to come to us. And it reduces the impact of queries, which any site personnel know are very annoying. Data review and monitoring happens next. So study data managers can then monitor the data in real time, focusing on specific areas of concern to ensure data quality and integrity. This is what happens after data validation. So we never can set up validation to catch everything that could possibly be wrong. There's so many different things. Studies are so flexible, and then having human participants means that we're going to have situations that we can't anticipate. So then the next step is to have someone like myself, a data manager, do data review, monitor the data, go through things, make sure that we're focusing on what needs to be focused on, doing a risk-based approach to data management. And that's something that's allowed because we have such good data validation tools. So we don't have to review everything super in-depth, but we can go through and review what is really, really important. And then once the data is collected and validated, we can export it in various formats for analysis and submission to regulatory bodies. We can do this at any point within an EDC. You can set it up so that you do interim analyses. You can freeze the database, export the data, and turn it into an analysis file and send it off to the statistician for analysis. So then what are some benefits of an EDC? So first is quicker access to data. An EDC system can save significant amount of time with real-time access to data and less time spent on query management. This also saves time at the end of a study, allowing quicker availability of the data for analysis. While it can take substantial time to initially learn how to use a specific system, some are so intuitive that only a few hours of training is required. Data security, an EDC system is hosted online with data entry completed on a web-based interface. So given the nature of the data collected in the EDC system, software vendors make sure the data is protected and backed up. And then because each user account has designated permissions, most actions can only be carried out by certain roles. So we do a lot of role restrictions within the EDC, and Advarra offers a lot of features regarding that. Accuracy, EDC systems improve data quality. There are options to add constraints on a form that prevent inaccurate or illogical values from being entered. It's using a computerized system, enables legible entries and automatic calculations for cleaner data versus using paper forms. Organization. Use of an EDC system increases the efficiency of clinical trials due to its user-friendly navigation. Search options allow you to easily find and filter exactly what you need and store everything in one location with greater visibility while using less paper. And then cost effectiveness. From financially speaking, the cost of an EDC system are expensive, but the ones that we have available are relatively cheap. So you can get some better time and saving options by using a higher quality EDC as well, because in the long run, it saves us a lot of time as data managers, it saves PI, and it saves the site personnel from all of the rigorous and kind of tedious work that goes into entering data. And then compliance, really important factor. An EDC must be compliant with regulatory requirements. A big one is 21 CFR Part 11, which I'll kind of talk about here in a little bit. And the software should have technical controls in place to ensure data integrity. properly maintain an EDC system, SOPs are essential and written, and ensuring regulatory and organizational policies are met. So there's a lot of benefits to an electronic data capture system. That's a lot of words, but really at the end of the day, it comes down to it's quicker, it's efficient, it's more secure, and it's compliant with all of the regulatory standards that are required by the government. So kind of what are some common features? So we have an ECRF designer, which is a great tool for creating forms and ECRFs. There are a lot of design options that are meant to imitate paper forms, but they create them in the electronic setting. All the forms are saved in a library, and we can use those forms across multiple studies. So it's really nice that we can create this kind of global dictionary, global library that we can use across multiple studies, and we can maintain consistency across these. And it eliminates the need to recreate commonly used forms. It promotes data standards. There's a lot of data standard options out there. CDISC is a big one, which has CDASH, which is a data standard. And we can create forms like that, maintain them, and use them for a multitude of studies. And we are keeping up with those data standards as we do it. So then data entry. After a protocol is set up in the system, the data is collected and entered in the appropriate forms. A lot of these EDCs differ with data entry interfaces and tools and things like that. I think Advarra's data entry interface is very, very nice, but it gives a nice, easy, fluid workflow for study coordinators to enter data into the system. Automated data validation and edit checks. I kind of talked about this quite a bit already, but these validation and edit checks allow us to monitor the data in real time without having to be there to look at the data. And it's a great way to make sure that we're getting appropriate data and not getting something that shouldn't be reported. Real-time data access and monitoring. So we are able to, within the system, set roles and responsibilities down to a single field level. So we can restrict whoever needs to be restricted, and we can also have individuals to access one specific field if we needed to make sure that they're entering the appropriate data. So this stops us from having crossover, stops us from having people inadvertently editing data that they shouldn't be working in, and allows us to maintain and monitor everything that's going on with the study. That goes right along with our user access controls. Query management, the querying system in this is very nice. A lot of EDCs require the site coordinator to fill out the form and then hit save, and then it rolls out all the queries at once. Advarra has a system where it just tells you that something's going to be queried as you enter it. So you know if something's going to be wrong, and that kind of helps lower this query workload, which you see a lot in industry and in large studies where you're getting, hundreds to even thousands of queries over the life cycle of a study that are totally unnecessary because a little mistake was made. And then data export. Advarra has some great data export tools, and there are some these are like common features within EDC as well. Data export and the format that you can export in, how it exports, and things like that. So I'm going to briefly touch on everyone's favorite topic, which is regulatory compliance. We kind of need to discuss it because it's really important, but I'm going to be a little brief, just 2 slides here, so bear with me. So there's 2 specific types of regulatory compliance that we're worried about with an EDC. The first is 21 CFR Part 11, and this is arguably the most important when it comes to data capture. This is issued by the FDA. It sets requirements for electronic records and electronic signatures. It establishes the criteria for the creation, modification, maintenance, and transmission of electronic records. It mandates the controls to ensure the integrity, confidentiality, and availability of those electronic records. And it requires systems to generate secure, computer-generated, time-stamped audit trails to track changes to electronic records. That's a very, very important one that is really relevant to data capture systems because we need to be able to pull those time-stamped audit trails. In my career, I've been at the receiving end of a lot of audits, government, FDA, private from sponsors. And every single time that they come, they ask for the time-stamped audit trails, either for certain participants, certain phases, certain arms, or all of the data all at once. And that's something that you are expected to be able to pull very quickly and get to them immediately. And that's something that's very important for EDC systems to be compliant. And then systems must be validated to ensure accuracy, reliability, and consistent intended performance. So essentially, 21 CFR Part 11 oversees everything that's supposed to happen in an electronic data capture system, and then also how you sign off on things electronically. And so this is what EDCs are modeled after. Advarra eSource plus EDC, I'll talk about this briefly, but it is validated for 21 CFR Part 11 right out of the box. So there's nothing that we need to do within the actual system itself to make it compliant. It is compliant immediately. We have access to all the audit trails. It makes sure it maintains controls. It is validated, it's reliable, and it's consistent. So then the other one that is important is HIPAA, and then GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation of the European Union. So these protect health and personal data with strong security and encryption. It limits data access to authorized personnel, and then maintaining audit trails. That kind of goes hand in hand with 21 CFR Part 11. But that limited data access is really important when it comes to EDCs. Collect only necessary data and obtain explicit consent, enable individual rights to access and erase their data, and then promptly report data breaches as required by law. So these kind of aren't as important for an EDC as Part 11, but these are very important for us to make sure that we're limiting access to personnel, we're maintaining audit trails, and we're protecting personal health data and health information. So that's it for regulatory compliance. So we'll jump right into Advarra eSource plus EDC, the actual system that I'm presenting on. So what is it? According to Advarra, it is built for research sites and site networks. Workflows with Advarra eSource plus EDC platform allow you to easily capture and manage data, facilitate remote workflows, and eliminate duplicative processes for your staff. Essentially, it is a modern EDC format. It is an industry standard there and has all the capabilities you would expect from an industry standard EDC. It's streamlined and very, very easy to use. It's very intuitive, the interface. It's rigorous, and it's designed to handle high-risk studies. So the EDC itself is designed for multi-site, international, multi-arm, very complicated study builds and designs, and it can handle those all very well and with ease. So what are some of the data management features? These are the things that I'm particularly very interested in, but they're also really important for a study in general because these help the flow of the study. So it's got advanced automated validation features. I keep harping on these a lot, but they're very, very nice. They have edit checks, visit and time point tolerances, and conditional forms. So we can create validation things across forms, across sites based on key fields like date of birth and sex and ethnicity, anything like that. We can set these validations based on all of these things and move through the flow of the forms. So we don't have fields that are out there for individuals that don't need to see them. We can restrict things for participants that don't need to complete those, and we can make things visible and queried based on that. There are log form capabilities. This is very important. A log form essentially allows us to record multiple lines of data on one ECRF. That is something that REDCap is not capable of doing. You have to just create more forms and continue to roll out multiple of the same form in order to do something like that. So these log forms are easily integrated in there. They're able to capture things. And I'll show some examples in the future, but these are things that are really important, like for recording adverse events. We can record all of the adverse events on one form. We can keep it clean. We can show the history of adverse events, and that's really important for drug trials. There's advanced ECRF creation tools. I'll kind of go through some of these and show you what some of these tools look like and what some of the forms we can create in this system look like. Comprehensive lab reporting form capabilities. So that's something a lot of EDCs don't do very well. So much so that a lot of large data management centers in the industry side of the field pay for or develop their own lab reporting systems. So we are able to capture labs very easily in Advarra, and there's a very nice capabilities within there. There's global and protocol level user access controls. Kind of mentioned on this briefly. I could set a user to only have access to one field if I needed to. If we had a safety officer that needed to just sign off on adverse event forms, we could set a sign off field. We could show the safety officer that they could see the adverse event form, but they could only fill out the signature field, and we could set that access control specifically right there. And that is something easy to do within the system. There's remote monitoring access, which is very, very important. if you have studies that are heavily monitored. So you don't have to have the monitors come on site and go dig through paper forms and things like that. We can give them access. We can give them documentation. We can do it all within the secure EDC system. And then there's some advanced report creation tools that we can use to make some regularly run reports or some even ad hoc reports that might want to be seen without having to export the data. So some of our design capabilities, there's multiple form styles and sections available. So we get grid, lab, list, and matrix, but the multiple section types can be combined on one eCRF, and you can interact with both sections. And more importantly, you can create validation across both sections. So if you wanted to create a form that had a list at the beginning with some intro questions, and then you wanted to add a matrix to do a questionnaire, you could do that, and you can have them flow seamlessly into each other, and they look really nice. And you can set your validation based off of those entry-level questions, and that would affect the matrix. There's a comprehensive list of field types available that carry clear validation rules. You can see that on the screenshot I have over here. So you can do attachments, calculations, dates, times, durations, a bunch of different things that we can have set up so that we can capture whatever we would ever need to capture within an EDC. It's an intuitive UI for both the data manager and the research coordinator, and it's designed to allow for easy creation of CDASH compliant forms. That's something that I mentioned briefly. CDASH is essentially just like a data standard that we use a lot in the field, and we can create forms really easily in that format and make them and maintain them within this system. So constraint capabilities, I've talked about these a lot. This is kind of what our validation is. There's several constraint types, options that encompass almost all scenarios needed for efficient data management. It's easy to learn. They're comprehensive formula structure that can be applied and tested rapidly. They have a lot of help text on there that you can go through and find all of the different expressions that you need. Edit checks occur in real time and it can either prevent the form from being saved if there is an error, or can warn the user while keying the form that a query will populate. So this is really important. Like I said, this kind of reduces the impact of queries. People can correct things as they're typing, and they can know when an error is going to pop up. And then form and protocol level constraints that can be combined to control data entry field by field based on study conditions. So we can go through and create constraints based on the actual study and say, you know, if they're in a specific arm, we don't want all of these forms to roll out, or maybe we don't want all of those fields to roll out because they're on the control arm and they're only getting a certain dosage. So we can change that within the system and make things really intuitive. And this is 21 CFR Part 11 compliance. You know, Advarra has a simplified data workflow that ensures the Part 11 compliance. It enables site sponsor collaboration with remote workflows, ensures investigator oversight with its signature software, integrates with Clinical Conductor and the CTMS. It has a comprehensive audit trail with quick access workflow if needed rapidly. That's kind of what I discussed with audits. Streamlined Part 11 validation process, and it is complete freeze, lock, and investigator sign-off processes with comprehensive documentation. And then the eSource capabilities, which is the other half of the name of this. So the FDA definition of eSource is that it's any combination of text, graphic, data, audio, pictorial, or other information represented in a digital form that is created, modified, maintained, archived, retrieved, or distributed by a computer system. So essentially, it's anything electronic that's used as source is what we think about in the terms of clinical trials and clinical research. So it streamlines remote workflows, it allows remote monitoring capabilities, it's got seamless integration, easy oversight and compliance, and it's a rapid implementation. So essentially, this allows us to start creating source forms within the EDC. So you can upload PDFs, you can scan forms in there. There are capabilities in the future that are going to allow us to integrate with an EMR, so electronic medical record, and just pull data directly in. But this allows us to transition the source documentation from solely paper to things that are within the electronic system. And it's all compliant with all the regulatory standards to do that. So now I'll show you a couple of like forms. So that was a lot of data management heavy stuff. That's a lot of stuff that's really important to data managers and site coordinators. But what does it look like at the end of the day? So this is just a quick example of a demographics form. It's just a list here. You can see our simple things, you know, a lot of different things. It's fluid. It's really easy to read. It's nice. You can follow it down the page. You have your help text. You have your information things in here. You can see with a little red asterisk what is required. And if things are filled out and changed, then it might reduce some of these fields. It might pull them away. It might make some of them visible that were hidden previously. So it's just a nice fluid form. Vital signs. So this is an example of how you can have a list that turns into a lab form. So those first two fields, time and position, are a list. So it's a different file, like a different data format that then seamlessly transitions into a lab type, which we actually use to create some vital signs things. So systolic blood pressure, diastolic blood pressure, pulse rate, respiratory rate, and temperature, all our normal stuff. But it's set up in this fashion that we can have a quick flow from the starting questions into these, and then you can collect that data in a nice, easy to enter table where you have your results, your units. If the vital signs weren't collected, as you can see with respiratory rate and temperature, just grays out the next two fields. The study coordinator knows they don't have to complete those, and they can just continue to move on. So then a list and a matrix. So this is a quality of life assessment. Was it completed? We have those first initial questions, and then it jumps right into the matrix form. And importantly, if you look at the asterisk, the only field that's required in the beginning of it is the yes or no field. So if they enter yes, everything else then would become required. If they enter no, then the other fields would all just disappear. They become hidden, and they wouldn't be required anymore because we don't need them to fill out the questionnaire. And this is where you see a lot of issues with data as a data manager. I see a lot of problems that pop up and stem from things like this, where these workflows aren't in place and then people inadvertently enter data that they shouldn't be entering. So this is an injection dose log. This is an example of a log form. So you have all those fields kind of in the top here that they're filling out, and then they can fill out those fields as many times as they want, and it'll log it below in this table. So we can see the workflow, we can see how many things are needed. So if there is a treatment that a participant comes into clinic and they needed to get 2 doses over the course of a certain period of time, they can get those and they can monitor those on the same form and show the different times of injections, the doses, everything like that, all in one interface that's really easy to read and really easy to follow. And it's really easy for a study coordinator to enter. And then this one's a little small. I'm not going to talk about everything in it, but this is the adverse event. This is the grid that I was talking about. This is a really important form in data management. We always want to be collecting AEs. We want to make sure if there's SAEs that need to be reported to the FDA, that we can collect those in a timely and efficient manner. And with this system, we are allowed to collect them in a grid up top. And then we have that log at the bottom that we can log these adverse events in. So anytime something happens, they can add an adverse event, even if it's minor, major, whatever, it logs in there. And then we can go back to this form at any time with the PI, and we can walk through any of these forms. If we have to do adjudication of adverse events, it's all in one place. It's very easy to pull, and we can go through the flow of the adverse events that the participant has experienced over the life cycle of a study. I've been on a lot of studies in my career that have lots of adverse events, things like injection site reactions where you see a ton of stuff. And this kind of workflow in this form makes it a lot easier to track and a lot easier to maintain safety for the study. All right, so then we'll kind of get into the benefits of what everyone here is for, is what are our benefits for academic research? So right now at UB, we kind of use one system primarily, and that is REDCap. And REDCap's a great system, but it has some limitations. So some pros and cons here between REDCap and Advarra EDC. REDCap is appropriate for low to moderate data complexity. It's suitable for low regulatory risk studies. It's got a quick deployment timeline if a team is experienced, which most people here at UB are, and it's familiar to many research teams. But there are some cons with REDCap. It is not suitable for high regulatory risk studies. It is not necessarily audit ready and audit compliant for the most part. You have to make it very audit ready and compliant, and that's a lot of work that goes into that. There's limited monitoring and querying tools within REDCap. It's less than ideal for multi-site studies due to its limitations with data quality oversight tools and scalability. It's a lot harder to run a multi-site study, especially an international study in REDCap. So that's a definite con. And then there's some basic reporting features, but there's not some super in-depth reporting features that you can find in other EDCs. REDCap is overall a great tool. Fantastic for most of the research that does occur at UB. But for larger studies and higher regulatory risk things, you want something and want an EDC that's rigorous and can handle those type of things. And that's where Advarra eSource plus EDC comes in. It's highly rigorous and robust. It's capable of handling high risk and industry sponsored studies. It has advanced monitoring and audit trails. It's scalable for multi-site studies, and it's got a comprehensive reporting capabilities. Some cons with it, though, are that it may require more training. Not everybody's familiar with this type of EDC or these types of EDCs. It's got a longer deployment timeline because there's a lot more things that can be set up. And it may be too complex for some simple low-risk studies. So not everybody's going to benefit from Advarra eSource plus EDC. It's not necessarily for every study out there, but it's there for the more high-risk, more complicated protocols that we do see and we're seeing a lot more of. So it has a lot of enhanced data accuracy and integrity. I've talked about this quite a bit so far, but this platform really does have standardized data capture. It meets the Good Clinical Data Management Practices standards, which is also known as GCDMP, and it meets the best practices and is built with CDASH in mind. I've mentioned CDASH quite a few times. It's the Clinical Data Acquisition Standards Harmonization. No one probably knows that. I do for some reason because I know I use it all the time. But it basically means that this data in this EDC is all set up to meet these high standards that everybody wants to be using. It's integrated with data management workflows. It's got comprehensive constraint creation tools. It reduces transcription errors, which is a huge, huge thing. Transcription errors and missingness in data are very, very big things that my job is all primarily about dealing with. How do we deal with missingness? How do we reduce transcription errors? So we give you, the PIs, the highest quality data possible. And then it's got comprehensive audit trails and secure signatures for tracking and compliance. So that just means that anytime when using the system, we're a lot less at risk for any types of audits. So if an audit were to come down the line, it's still not going to be fun, but we're going to have a lot more and we're going to be set up a lot better for dealing with it with this system. It is high risk and complex study ready. It meets all the regulatory requirements for high risk study. It has the infrastructure needed for FDA reporting studies. That's very important. FDA reporting has a lot of requirements. You have to submit certain data types. You have to submit them in certain timelines. And this system is ready to handle an FDA reporting study. It is designed to handle complex study designs, including multi-arm, longitudinal, or crossover study designs. It's scalable and capable of efficiently handling multi-site clinical trials and studies, including studies at international sites. And it's got built-in adverse event and study deviation reporting tools. So this says that you can be notified, set up for notifications whenever something is reported as an adverse event or study deviation. Really important for FDA reporting studies as well, because you do have to report SAEs to the FDA. And then it's got a robust audit readiness infrastructure. I'm kind of harping on a lot of these points. I say them a lot, but they are very, very important aspects of an EDC. And then time and cost saving. So other large EDC systems are significantly more costly to implement. We've managed to set this up at UB through our office. And so the only cost to PIs is the cost of us and our office being on there, either hourly or with percent effort. It's got a robust data management tools and constraint capabilities to reduce the amount of manual data review required. So at the end of the day, you pay me as a data manager, I have an hourly cost that comes with working on a study. My time is less committed to a study if I have a tool that I can use that cuts down on my requirements. So this allows me to have less hours invested in the study per week, which ends up saving the PIs at the end of the day. It's designed with a risk-based approach to data management in mind, which is really important because if you have an audit, that's going to take a lot of time and it's going to cost a lot to make sure that you're ready and you're willing. And a lot of people panic when an audit comes down the line. And this software does really help prepare for audits. And then there's a streamlined study closure process, including efficient freeze lock and then PI sign-off procedures. So for us in the data management and the statistical realm, it's a lot easier working in a system like this to get all the data finalized, cleaned, frozen, locked, signed off, and ready to go for analysis. So that saves time in moving through that end phase of a study. So then I'll briefly talk here about the system architecture and some of the workflows within it. So this is kind of a crazy thing that is shown here. Most people won't be interested in it, but this is what the general architecture of this platform looks like. It's internet based. There's two instances in the EDC, a production and a staging instance. Staging is basically our test instance, so we can create participants, we can test things in there, and that works well. Database is stored in SQL or SQL. Multiple security layers throughout, which is very, very important. They have firewall, they have backups. Everything is well designed by the company Advarra, who maintains the system. And then data is replicated and backed up with a guaranteed disaster recovery and backup plans in place. And as you can see from this architecture, basically, most things go from the research center, the customer itself, into the Advarra's cloud-based system. It's stored within the production and staging environments, and then it's backed up within this other production instance that is backed up there. So the architecture of it is relatively simple, but it is really secure and is cloud-based, which is a great, great feature, especially for multi-site studies, where you can have people all over the place entering and going into this cloud-based system wherever and whenever. The system is designed with role-based access in mind, so PIs, clinical research coordinators, monitors, data managers, etc. Allows for custom roles and access. Roles can be created as protocol specific. I've kind of touched on these quite a bit. It's mobile and web-based interface, which is really, really nice. I don't know why anyone would use the mobile interface, but it does exist. Most people would enter in data from their computer, but it is there. And it's got a customizable homepage, which is what you see right here with important information immediately highlighted. So this is what the homepage looks like for a study coordinator. So you go in, you see what forms are assigned to you, what visits and forms need approval, if you ever had anything that needed approval. And then it shows you this really nice boxes here that are upcoming visits, open queries, responded queries, and then like form entry aging. So you can see anything that's needed, anything that you need to do right by clicking into the system. So it's designed to help the research coordinators have a more efficient workflow when they jump in. They can see what's missing, what's wrong, what's upcoming, and they can just go in and address it right away. This is just a brief data flow diagram. This is more relevant for the study coordinators themselves, which I think we have a few on the call. So for study coordinators, the workflow with this system is pretty standard. Subject is consented to the study. Their information is entered into the Encore. So we do link right with Encore. And then the information from that participant is auto-imported from Encore directly into the system. So Advarra, which makes this EDC, also makes our CTMS system, which is Encore. So the data that's entered there just directly flows right into the EDC. You don't have to dual entry any participants. Then the participant visit occurs. You enter the data into the source documents. Then you enter the visit details. You transcribe all the data from the source into the EDC subject forms. And then the queries will roll out and things like that. And then it kicks it over to the next phase, which is either study monitoring, if you're using study monitoring, or data managers, whatever that workflow looks like. So it's a really nice streamlined workflow, easy to follow, and it works out well for study coordinators. So then integrations with other existing systems. We only have really one, but that's Encore, and it's a very, very important one. It's a reason that we went after this EDC. So it's got seamless integration with our Advarra Encore CTMS system, which is a clinical trial management system for those who aren't aware. Basically is where we store, study information, funding, all that kind of stuff. So a lot of the overall information about a study. So this minimizes duplicate data entry. Like I said, if you enter a participant on Encore, it flows directly into eSource EDC, maintains consistent records and tracking between both systems. Things that occur in eSource and EDC, vice versa, also go into Encore. So in Encore, you can now see, administrators can now see kind of the flow of the study. You get some basic information about what's going on. It streamlined the pulling of organizational records, protocols, and participants in the EDC. When I set up a study, I can pull it directly from Encore. It pulls all the sites that are registered. It pulls all of the information from the protocol that is there, all the study number, IRB numbers, things like that, all directly in the system. There's no need to re-enter any of that stuff. So we have a really good link between those systems. And then it shares report creation tools and functionality. So both systems can create reports based off of each other, which is a really nice integration that we have. So then some future features here. So these are some things that are coming down the line. The EDC is actually relatively new to Advarra. They purchased it a couple years ago from a smaller company, and they've been working to build it up to a very high level competitive thing. They have calls with us. They have forum pages that we can go and interact with. I communicate with them relatively frequently about all this stuff. And so they have a bunch of features that they plan on bringing on board within the next year or two. So the biggest one is integration with Epic. This would allow for direct data import and allow for electronic source documentation. So Epic is something that is also coming to UB. So we would be able to integrate directly with that. We'd be able to transition EMR records directly to the EDC. Epic is also probably the most commonly used EMR in the country. So this is a really nice thing to be able to integrate with between an EDC and an EMR. They are working on adding electronic patient reported outcomes, or ePro. These are essentially just questionnaires that are administered directly to the participants and completed electronically. And it would allow for data entry directly from the participant. Their plan is to have them either be text message questionnaires that you can have automatically sent to the participants that can be completed and filled out, and the data is directly entered, or you could set them up through an iPad that you have within the clinic that you set up. You select the participant, you pull the questionnaire that they have, you give it to them, and they can enter in that data. So this is really nice, and they're creating it so it is regulatory compliant. All that data that's going to be entered is going to meet all of our regulatory standards. So, and that's a little bit of a tricky thing to do with some of this participant entered data. And then document annotation and routing. So this is PDF. So this allows for document review and annotation directly within the secure EDC infrastructure. This is kind of there for any protocol documentation that want to be reviewed within the system if you wanted to, and for source documentation, specifically regarding monitoring. And so that will allow you to enter that, upload that documentation into the system. It's securely stored, and then you can route it to individuals who need it. You can annotate things that need to be annotated and stuff like that. So if you are interested, that's kind of everything I have about the EDC. If you're ever interested in working on it, interested in working with my office, the Office of Clinical Trial Development and Implementation, you can contact us. So although we're focused in collaboration on grant-funded large trials and trial-based centers, it may be seen as a contact point for all trial-based research. A request for us should include any requests for applications being responded to, timelines for submissions, tentative aims, outcomes, and eligibility criteria, and then tentative information on feasibility constraints, number of sites, patient pool size, et cetera, those kind of things. Our demand is relatively high and is expected to continue to increase. So please try to contact us 2 months in advance if you're interested in reaching out. And if you are interested, you should contact Dr. Greg Wilding. His email's there. And we also have a website that also has all of this information in it. If you just look up OCTDI UB, it should pop right up, and you can open that up and you can find all of our information located there, along with some information about the Advarra EDC and REDCap and their comparisons between the two. So that was everything that I had. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, not hearing anything. Well, thank you all for. Oh. All right. Yep. Thank you all for joining and listening to me talk about data management for a while. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Austin.